So the left-wing media is trying to blame the Jews for the deadly attacks on them, while the president of the United States is too busy barbecuing to speak to the public while several Americans are either dead or being held hostage in Gaza. This is The Brink. And just to preface, if you support what is happening right now to Israel, if you support Palestine, if you can justify what we have seen on this weekend, unsubscribe. You are disgusting. The level of savagery that we have seen from these animals, that's what they are animals, over the weekend is gut-wrenching. Kidnapping innocent civilians, kidnapping Holocaust survivors, beheading soldiers, raping women, leaving a field of dead people. That is third world stuff from these monsters. And if you haven't seen it, you have to see it, because we cannot always turn a blind eye when this is how Jews are being treated. Have a look. Whatever Israel needs to do to protect itself deserves our full support, okay? Send those people back to the damn Stone Ages if need be. Palestinians have consistently elected Hamas to govern them for years. They have consistently celebrated the brutal treatment of Jews, whether it's cheering in the street, whether it's teaching their children to hate Jews. They deserve no sympathy. And yet, the Democratic Socialists of New York City held a rally on Sunday supporting Hamas terrorists. Have a look.
From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Palestine will be free. Free, free, free Palestine.
But the real terrorist is the Israeli state that has been murdering, massacring.
And here you have, among the mix, these obese, blue-haired liberal lesbians, these queer people who would be beheaded if they stepped foot in Gaza. But by all means, support mass genocide. Can you imagine, just for a second, what it is like to be a Jew in New York? You're walking down a street that you've walked down every single day, but this time there are hundreds of people who are actively calling for a genocide against you and anyone who believes in what you do. Your mother, your father, your siblings, your cousin, your child, your niece, your nephew. We have the FBI going after MAGA grandmas, and yet these are the people we allow to walk the streets? These tough guys with their masks on? The same way that we look upon the KKK with disgust is the same way we should look at these rally goers. They are no better. They are outright supporting a genocide of Jews on the streets of America. And the best part about all of this is you will soon hear from these activists about the deaths of poor Palestinians, right? But just remember something. Israel gave a 24-hour plus warning to Palestinians to leave the area because they said we are going in there. And what did Hamas do? It said stay put. Hamas has no regard for human life. They are using Palestinians as human shields, and yet you have New Yorkers on the street defending Hamas. Will you defend them when Palestinians are being killed because they're being used as human shields? And if you do, that means you're an anti-Semite. You should condemn all of what Hamas is doing. But it's not just the socialists that are here justifying murder. It's the media. MSNBC's anti-Semitism on full display this weekend. So Ali Velshi and Palestinian political analyst Noor O'Day said we need to give, quote, context to what's happening, as if there is anything you could say that could justify what we have seen. Have a listen.
American politicians and other politicians think they can just ignore the context in which all of this is happening. The fact that Israel is an occupying power, the fact that Israel has violated international law and Palestinian rights as per, the experts, the leading UN agencies and leading human rights organizations around the world, like Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International. Their word is reliable and acted on in other areas, but not here, because Israel is the U.S.'s ally, because Israel, you spend taxpayer money on buying Israel defense systems and trying those defense systems on Palestinians. And you don't want to bother that. You don't want to change that balance or change the status quo.
And it's not just them. It is HuffPost, who says that the attacks weren't unprovoked, and then they try to blame Israel for the so-called apartheid. It is the New York Times that published a piece, Gaza has suffered under 16-year blockade. It starts off with a sentence that said that some Palestinians can understand the attacks because of the blockade. Let me tell you something, you terrorist apologist. Palestinians who understand the attacks are about to understand a hell of a lot more when Israel flattens Gaza. Let them keep electing Hamas to power. Let them reap what they sow. How much blood, how much Jewish blood, must be shed for unequivocal condemnation of a terrorist organization. A terrorist organization! And I am fighting with people about why they're wrong. And last and certainly not least, so we aren't exactly sure what's happening, but what we do know is that there are Americans being held hostage or possibly having been killed by Hamas. And where's President Biden? Oh, yeah, he's barbecuing. He barbecued on Sunday night. This is the day after he was hours late to come out and say a statement about Israel, okay? Is it because he doesn't want to face reporters who are now going to hound him with questions about his ideal with Iran? The same country that has now come forward and said it gave, quote, the final go-ahead for Hamas's attack on Israel. We gave them $6 billion so they can go and coordinate an attack with a terrorist organization to hurt our greatest ally, to hurt American citizens. And I know Biden is sitting back right now like, you mean to tell me that negotiating with terrorists that have spent years chanting death to America, death to Israel, didn't result in peace? Who would have thought? I don't know. Anybody who thinks? And let's not forget about Qatar. They are harboring Hamas leaders in Doha. We need a hardline approach towards them as well, because no one gets to get off here for what has happened to Israel. Every single person, every nation that harbors these terrorists must be held to account. Former Vice President Mike Pence, and I just want to emphasize his title because that is all he will ever be. Blamed, wait for it, Donald Trump. Have a listen.
But I also believe this is what happens when we have leading voices like Donald Trump, Vivek Ramaswamy, and Ron DeSantis signaling retreat from America's role as leader of the free world.
Very interesting. So in the 4 years under Trump, we had not a single war. And in fact, we had the Abraham Accords. And then we let a senile geriatric come into office and see not one, but two invasions of two separate countries, on top of threats from our biggest geopolitical threat to invade Taiwan, on top of negotiating with terrorists that then go and use that money to plot an attack against, once again, our greatest ally, which includes American citizens. What an asinine take from a man that wouldn't even have name recognition if it weren't for Donald Trump. Folks, pray for Israel. Pray for Jews worldwide who have a target on their back, not just this weekend and the weeks going forward, but every single day because they are Jewish. And I just want to share a quick story actually before I go, because this weekend has just made me think of it. A few years back, I was working at a different company. My boss was Jewish, and he'd always say to me, jokingly, and I realize it's not a joke now, he'd say, Bree, would you hide my family and I? And, you know, he'd laugh and I'd laugh and I'd be like, of course I would. Why is that even a question? And he knows, of course I would, because my grandfather's family, some escaped Auschwitz, some didn't. And I'd always think to myself, what a useless question. It is, it's 2019, it's 2020. That is not going to happen. And then I see what happens this weekend. Not just in Israel, but in America, in the United States of America. I see people calling for genocide on the streets of New York. And it was in that moment that I realized he was never joking. It was never a joke. That was a serious question. He wanted to know whether or not he could keep his family safe in America, in 2019, in 2020. Less than 100 years after the Holocaust, you have Jews who have to worry whether or not they will have friends who will hide them from people that want to kill them because they are Jewish. And how naive was I? How naive was I to be like, oh, like that's a weird joke. It was never a joke. That is how Jews have to live, in the back of their mind. Do I have someone that could hide me? And what happened this weekend solidifies it. Folks, I have nothing else to say about this. Pray for Israel.